Nowadays, when a news story breaks, most of us can read about it in the blink of an eye. But before smartphones, keeping the public updated wasn't so easy. It required speed, wit, and a whole lot of writing. This is the story of a CUNY graduate who became a Pulitzer Prize winner and the twists and turns he encountered both in the news and in life.
The wreckage of a huge luxury jetliner marks the scene of the worst single-plane disaster in U.S. history.
On March 1st, 1962, as New York City was preparing for a ticker tape parade to celebrate astronaut John Glenn, American Airlines Flight 1 from New York to Los Angeles lost control in midair and took a nosedive, crashing into Jamaica Bay with 95 souls on board. There were no survivors. Working at the New York World Telegram and the Sun that morning is newspaperman Sylvan Fox. As a rewrite man, Sylvan's job is to field phone calls coming from the reporters on site, each one feeding him bits and pieces of information, and to put the pieces together into a coherent story. Within 30 minutes, Sylvan has assembled a full article on the crash, which is rushed out for publication. But his job isn't over. For hours, new fragments of information pour in by phone, and Sylvan needs to update his story for each subsequent edition the paper prints that day. He continues writing and rewriting, working tirelessly to keep an anxious public informed of the day's tragedy. Feverishly typing and fielding calls wasn't exactly Sylvan's initial idea for a career. In fact, this rewrite man had already rewritten his own life story several times before that fateful day. Born in 1928 to a middle-class Jewish household in Brooklyn, Sylvan was named not by his parents, but by his aunt, who thought the name would look good in print. But his first passion was music. Having fallen in love with the classical music he was exposed to in New York's thriving cultural scene, Sylvan decided to attend Juilliard, where he began studying piano. At Juilliard, Sylvan met the woman who would become his wife and mutual life coach through many ups and downs, Gloria Endelman. The two bonded over their mutual love of music, and Sylvan enjoyed exposing this small-town Canadian girl to all the music that New York had to offer. The two married in 1948. With their fates now intertwined, Sylvan and Gloria began to contemplate their future, and found themselves dissatisfied with the general non-musical education being offered at Juilliard. "Hell," Sylvan once remarked to Gloria, "we have more meaningful conversations in the subway than we do in those classrooms." Unsure of what to do and searching for inspiration, the two took time off from school for a sojourn in Paris. This extended immersion into a foreign culture convinced Sylvan more than ever of the need for a high-quality liberal arts education, and upon their return, he decided to finish his education at Brooklyn College. In her own memoir, Gloria Fox described Sylvan's time at Brooklyn College. He eagerly began his studies like a man fighting the cold water of a spring after a long trek in the desert. Heavy reading assignments, which may have been burdensome for a less agile mind, were a challenge that he welcomed and thrived on. The intellectual stimulation that he had missed so much at Juilliard was now available to him. Combining his credits from Juilliard with summer and winter sessions at Brooklyn College, Sylvan was able to graduate in 1 year, earning a degree in philosophy in 1951. Sylvan had made one rewrite to his education, but wasn't ready to leave music behind. He continued on to UC Berkeley, where he earned a master's degree in musicology, but now faced a difficult choice. Though he wished to compose music, pursuing a PhD would likely mean a life of teaching while attempting to compose on the side. And his experiences in Paris and at Brooklyn College had left him yearning for a life outside of academia. After many long conversations with Gloria, the two decided on the biggest rewrite of their lives, ending their formal education in music. What would come next, though, wasn't clear. Returning to New York, and now with a young daughter, Erica, Sylvan worked a number of odd jobs, while Gloria helped support the family by teaching piano. But it was an ad for a reporting job at the Little Falls Evening Times in upstate New York that caught Sylvan's attention. His renewed desire to explore the wider world made reporting an exciting proposition for him, and after applying, he was accepted to the position. Sylvan immediately demonstrated his skill for reporting. Within only a year, he worked his way up a series of jobs at larger and larger newspapers across the state, where his employers began to entrust him with high-profile stories. But his real goal was to work for a newspaper in New York City, and after several years at the Buffalo Evening News, landed a job at the New York World Telegram and the Sun. At the World Telegram, Sylvan became renowned for his speed in writing, making him the perfect fit for the role of rewrite man. In the hyper-competitive newspaper world of New York City, quickly publishing and updating stories was crucial, and it was this high-pressure task that Sylvan was given on that day in 1962 when American Airlines Flight 1 crashed just outside the city.
Authorities began the grisly task of recovering bodies from the wreckage. The scene was one of dismal futility as firemen and policemen, some weeping openly, waded into the shallow, marshy water to find the remains of men and women who had only minutes before departed happily for a trip to the West Coast.
With more and more information coming into the office well after the morning publication, Sylvan rewrote his initial article not once or twice, but 6 times for the 6 editions that followed over the course of the day. It was a marathon of reporting that would have tested even the most seasoned of newspapermen. Meeting Gloria for dinner later that night and washed out by the long, frantic workday, Sylvan slumped down at the restaurant bar and turned to his wife. "If I'm ever going to win a Pulitzer," he said to her, "I won it today." Though his declaration was said in jest, Sylvan did indeed win a Pulitzer, and it was indeed for that day. In 1963, Sylvan Fox was awarded the Pulitzer Prize in Local Reporting Edition Time, along with his co-workers Anthony Shannon and William Longgood for their work covering the Jamaica Bay crash. Sylvan Fox continued to cover major breaking stories at the World Telegram, including the Cuban Missile Crisis and the assassination of John F. Kennedy, but the rewrites of his own career didn't stop either. In 1964, he wrote a book on the JFK assassination, one of the earliest to take a critical look at the Warren Commission report. And in 1967, he finally landed a job he'd been dreaming of since his days in Little Neck, reporter for the New York Times. On the day of his orientation, news broke of a bank robbery that had just occurred in Brooklyn. Sylvan's new boss told him to forget orientation and get to work on the story instead. And with that, after only one day at the New York Times, Sylvan Fox had his writing on the front page. From his pivot to liberal arts at Brooklyn College, to his big leap into the unknown after Berkeley, to his eclectic work outside the newspaper business, Sylvan Fox rewrote his own aspirations as adroitly as he rewrote the news, culminating in a life of curiosity and learning. And that's a story worth reading about.